eighth wonder of the world, basically a geek show. And here are your hosts, Mike and Jack.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 72 of Basically a Geek Show. This is Jack, and sitting here with me is Mike.
I don't know what is real anymore. I just don't know. This is going to be part 2 of the Basically a Podcast Network Goes Political series. Basically a sports show, which I recorded with Greg on Monday. Zach was unfortunately unable to join us for that one, but Greg and I just talked about politics. We talked about the fallout from the election, and I'm here with Jack to do it again. We'll get back to you guys with BlizzCon, with a BlizzCon wrap-up, probably in about a week, but right now we're just going to talk about politics and...
Because especially in this case, I think life is stranger than fiction.
Yeah, it is, because I'm just going to ask the same thing that I opened up basically a sports show with, and that is, America, what did you do?
I think, honestly, God.
And I'm not trying to sound condescending. I'm legitimately asking, what have you done? Because I don't think anyone, including yourselves, knows what you've done.
No, I think we do, actually. I really think we do. And I'll get to that here in a moment, but I'm just going to kind of take it from the top, because you and I, we watched, well, you watched most of it. Mike and I, as per our 4-year tradition, this is our 3rd election watching together. And hard to believe, 12 fucking years. Jesus Christ.
I even got you watching the Canadian election.
Oh, yeah,
2015.
I watched the Canadian election.
Which you commented was much more to the point and not so bloated on map porn.
Right. Oh, God. That was funny. Like, just hearing you is kind of like an outsider being on the end for the first time and watching it, you know, and you see the sheer masturbation on fucking CNN. And
I forgot what year I was looking at one point.
I did too, man. Dude, zooming in, zooming out. How many different ways can you explain, okay, well, we can't call this state yet because X county, Y county, and Z county, or I'm sorry for you, Z county, are still counting votes in these areas.
It boiled
affect the outcome.
It boiled down to, we can't call the state yet because they're still counting votes. Okay, got it.
But I mean, everyone, and I mean, like, even Trump's own campaign went into this thinking, well, guys, we had a good run. I mean, early in the evening, you know, one of the a senior Trump campaign official said, well, it'll take a miracle to win. All the polls said it. You know, and evidently the Trump campaign had their own internal polling data that they thought was correct. But, I mean, they still didn't know for sure. And, you know, we're sitting there and we're watching. Of course, the early returns come in, and they all look to pretty much be on point with what was anticipated. Hillary, you know, doing Hillary's thing, whatever that may be.
Trump winning, you know, Indiana. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, Trump winning Indiana, Trump winning Kentucky. You know, everyone winning states that everyone knew they were going to win because that's what they do. And then comes Florida. And they made me, like, audibly dizzy just by saying who was in the lead. And it was literally changing by the time they had finished saying the candidate that was in the lead, the other one had taken them over. And, you know, Florida's gone Democrat the last 2 elections.
Yes.
And as they're so fond of saying at CNN, and we'll get to them here later on. I got some things to say about them. We'll get to that. But they kept, you know, saying, oh, you know, the shifting demographics in Florida. And they painted this like this nationwide trend. You know, shifting demographics vastly favor the Democrats. And we'll get to that too. And I'm just thinking Florida. it's going to go to Hillary, and that's it. And I think Florida did get called for Trump, and both of us were just kind of like, what? And as I pointed out at the time, I mean, well, that doesn't mean he fucking wins. That simply means he's in it for a little bit longer. I mean, this just isn't going to happen. And then it did. I think.
Well,
Hmm?
I was gonna say I pretty much knew it was going. I pretty much knew it was Hillary's. That Hillary had lost when Trump's leads in Wisconsin and Michigan held. Like, it's one thing when they first start reporting polling from those states and Trump's in the lead because, whatever you start, when votes first start polling in, they're from, like, one rural county with, like, 50 votes and, like, 30 of them go for Trump and, like, Trump suddenly has a big lead in the state. You can't take that to the bank, but once those leads held, even after the urban center started reporting in, I pretty much knew, Michigan, without Michigan and Wisconsin, Hillary doesn't have a shot.
And Wisconsin, funnily enough, I mean, Wisconsin has not gone Republican since '84, I want to say. Right?
84 was the year that every state except Minnesota went Republican.
Yeah, because Walter Mondale. And his abject, insipid mediocrity. So, I mean, that was the thing. And then, the funny thing is, and this was after you had gone to bed, and I stayed watching CNN because, well, I've been in with them this far. And Hillary actually called and conceded the race before CNN called the fucking election.
Well, CNN tends to be, from what I've heard, CNN tends to be a bit more hesitant when it comes, like, for example, I know that CNN called Florida for Trump later than most other news outlets did. I think CNN, out of all of the major networks, really felt the burn from that 2000 boondoggle where... So I think CNN is just really fucking... I guess, cautious when it comes to this sort of thing. So I think everyone pretty much knew it when Hillary conceded that it was over, except, CNN was just being super cautious because they don't want to be that guy again.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, CNN was the last last mainstream news outlet to call the election. And even then, I just kind of sat here for a second. I just kind of looked at the screen and blinked. And I won't lie, even for me, there was this kind of moment, shit, now what the hell are we going to do? And I think all of us kind of felt that to some degree because, this was let's see, I did Bush, McCain.
Was 2000 the first year that you voted?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, 2000 was the first year I voted. And I can't remember if in '08 I voted for Romney or I just threw a picture of a cock on the ballot.
Well, that would have been 2012, not 08.
Rather. Yeah, sorry.
I still generally think Romney was a solid Republican candidate, but
even then, like, I don't know, it felt very differently because when I was in the booth, and yes, of course, in case anyone had any doubt, yes, I did vote for fucking Trump. I don't care what you say, I fucking voted. Suck my dick. Even then, like, my hand kind of hesitated for a second. For half a second, I considered just leaving it blank.
Mm-hmm.
And not because of anything Trump has said or done. It had nothing to do with any of that. It is, I know the scope of what he says he's going to do. And while I agree with 80% of it, it's still a very broad and sweeping agenda, and there's a lot that can get fucked up. And it would be it will be change on a scale that we really haven't seen in decades in this country. And it wasn't even fear of Trump. And I think that's the case for a lot of people, whether they realize it or not. Not fear of Trump, fear of the unknown. Because with Hillary, the lying, deceitful cunt that she is, at least you knew what you were getting. A lying, deceitful cunt. And, but with Trump, there's this unknown quantity there that I think kind of puts a lot of people uneasy. But I went ahead and did it. I didn't expect, anything to come out. Sure as hell didn't expect Pennsylvania to fucking go for Trump, because that hasn't gone Republican since '88. Yes,
that was something that I learned thanks to the map guy at CNN, who was very helpful.
But what's really been, the most interesting thing since then, of course, has been what I've termed Operation Salt Mines.
Uh-huh.
All of just the sheer amount of lunacy. My God, where do I even begin? For one thing, the mainstream media in this country, it will be years before they're ever respected again.
Well, there's a lot about that I wanna touch on, and and for people listening to both this and the recent, basically a sports show, you might hear me sort of repeating myself. But hey, I flew a lot of this material by Greg, saw what he thought, and I feel like, Jack, you probably have a different perspective, seeing as you are coming from a kind of different political position. And so on the media, one thing that I wanted to run by you is my theory on this as to why they missed so spectacularly is, for the longest time, you had a media industry that was more or less representative of the country as a whole, because you had your big newspapers and your big TV and your big channels and stations based out of big cities, but you also had your basically small town print, where even small rural towns would have their own newspapers, and because of this, taken as a whole, the media in the United States as an industry was more or less representative of the country as a whole. But, I mean, let's be honest, small-town newspapers are dying if they're not completely dead right now. And so what you have, as a result, is the media as an industry today is basically only exists within the confines of the large urban centers, basically New York, D.C., Los Angeles, then Philadelphia and Chicago. And this kind of dovetails into another talking point that I wanted to get into. That being that, to be frank, a lot of these media outlets in the, in these large urban centers, for a lot of them, your economically disadvantaged white voter simply either didn't exist or didn't matter. And because of that, their projections were off. Because of that, their analysis was off. Because, quite frankly, there was an entire demographic there that they failed to account for.
Because they didn't give a shit about them.
I'd say it's a combination of not giving a shit about them, and because of the way that the media industry has shifted with the death of of small town print, these people simply aren't represented in the media industry. And so it's a combination of, one, you're right, just not giving a shit about them, and two, basically media just didn't accept that they existed because the media representation of these groups, which was once something that existed, no longer does exist. And so they basically got wrapped up in their own bubble, so to say.
Oh, they were in a bubble, all right. And I don't entirely disagree. I mean, there is truth in what you're saying. I think the truth is somewhere between what you're saying and just the overall liberal media bias that's existed for the last 3 or 4 decades.
Okay, but let's talk about the media bias, though, because, I mean, it's 2016, and given the world that we live in, where not only do you have Fox News as a viable news channel, but
that's stretching it a bit. Go on.
But Fox News exists, and
it is a thing. Yes,
but you've got that. But then you've also got things. You've also got stuff like Breitbart. And I guess my point is that given the current year, given the way that we now consume media as a whole, as a society, I'm not going to deny that there's a liberal bias in, I guess, what you would call quote-unquote mainstream media. But wouldn't you say that the combination of Fox News, conservative domination in talk radio, and conservative alternative news sites like Breitbart have, at the very least, evened the game?
No.
Why not?
Because, okay, when you say Fox News, the reaction is pretty much the same no matter who you talk to these days, even if they are conservative. Mm-hmm. Fox News is MSNBC just on the other end. Mm-hmm. They are so biased in their respective ideologies that they can't be taken seriously. Now, I will tend to watch Fox over something else because, simply put, if I know there's going to be bias in my media, I'm at least going to take the bias that I'm closest to, because then I have to filter out a little bit less.
I would argue that CNN can be...
CNN is more clever, because CNN, okay, you'll look at, MSNBC, who'll just be like, today Donald Trump raped an old woman. When in reality he helped her cross the street. Fox will say Donald Trump single-handedly saved an old woman from a roving gang of rabid hellhounds. When in reality he just helped her cross the street. And probably grumbled while doing it. And CNN, they're much more subtle. But if you're familiar, especially if you look at their actual website, the pattern's easier to see if you go on their website more than actually watching the station, as I tend to do. Mm-hmm. But their bias comes in the form of the stories they choose to report, not necessarily in their wording of the stories, like a lot of others will do, but it comes in what they do and do not report. Mm-hmm. And what they choose to focus and spend more of their time on. So yeah, that's the thing with them. It is very much there. You just have to kind of, I guess, know it enough to know what to see. And maybe some people say, oh, well, you're reading too much into it. But no, I mean, that is a very valid tool of manipulating the flow of information.
But
that's exactly what it is.
But you don't think that, again, that I mean, because I mean, let's be honest.
Well,
but I mean, come on. Conservatives dominate talk radio. That's beyond a shadow of a doubt.
But most people don't listen to talk radio, and sites like Breitbart have yet to really come into their own.
They're editors now. Donald Trump's chief advisor.
So I'm not used to thinking in that way, but yeah, you're right. But I'm just saying, it's not, and in some ways, it's also like a website version of Fox News, just more respected because they haven't been around. Well, more respected by some. Some view them as just a mouthpiece for the alt-right, which they think are a bunch of neo-Nazis. Which may or may not be true. No one really agrees. So, I don't like the indie news sites. That whole trend is still relatively new. And there are so many out there that are just crap that, like, to the point where it's almost like going onto a fucking porn site with the fucking pop-ups, that it kind of gives the entire lot of them a bad name.
Mhm.
Though, again, if I am going to go to one of those, I will go to Breitbart just because they have some more interesting people on there than the others, if nothing else. But yeah, so that's kind of my take on it. I mean, and also there's a certain amount of, not everyone is going to be as internet savvy. Like there's still several generations of Americans that still prefer to get the news the way they've always gotten it,
Uh-huh.
off of the fucking TV.
Hmm.
And I mean, I'm only like one generation removed from that. So I mean,
Uh-huh.
I do kind of get it in a way, but at the same time, it's just blah, fuck it. Um, and I think that liberal bias in the media got a huge sucker punch because they were, even Fox to a large degree ended up being very critical of Trump.
Well,
And
I
I'm
would.
not saying there's not stuff to be critical about, because there is, but I mean, he pretty much had everything thrown in against him by everybody.
Well, I would argue. Well, I would argue two things. I would first argue that MSNBC is very much a propaganda arm of the Democratic Party. I would argue that, likewise, Fox News is a propaganda arm of the Republican Party. They are not a propaganda arm of the Donald Trump campaign. I think Breitbart is, but I don't think Fox News is.
I don't think Breitbart is either, because I don't know.
Their editor, again, though, is the chief advisor now to the president-elect, to
Right, but
President-elect
not
Trump.
right. But him and Rice Prius,
Uh-huh.
and that's what I'm going to call him. Him and Rice Prius do not get along at all.
No, they don't.
I mean, Bannon wanted to just eviscerate the Republican Party, and for good fucking reason.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I wouldn't even, I do not consider Trump to be a Republican in the strictest sense of the word. He's a new type of Republican, and an old type at the same time.
Yeah, I was going to say last night, privately, you were telling me that you expected Donald Trump to govern like a liberal New York Republican, and those were very much the first types of Republicans.
Well, yeah, I mean, in many ways, I do expect that, but he's going to put his own spin on it.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's one part liberal republicanism and one part national populism,
Mm-hmm.
which is its whole other ideology, which is kind of just beginning to see itself sprout up across Europe and now the U.S. And, whether that turns out to be ultimately a good thing or a bad thing, history's only to tell at this point. Personally, whether it ends up being good or bad, I think is what we need right now. I think Trump's election was a very angry, rage-filled reaction, and not for a lot of the reasons some people will say. Some people say, well, it's racist and it's hateful and blah, blah, blah.
I don't think it's...
Even Michael Moore's come out and said, Trump supporters aren't voting out of racial motivation.
Oh. I know.
And if he's fucking saying it, then Jesus Christ.
I don't think it's racist. I think race is a factor, but not in, and again, this is kind of be retreading ground, but I think it's a discussion really worth having, and I think it's a discussion that needs to be screamed as much as possible. Because I think race is a factor, but it's not in a racist sense, if that makes sense. I think for the longest time, at least the past couple of decades, that when the Democratic Party talked about poverty and talked about addressing poverty, they talked about it in terms of black poverty and in terms of Latino poverty. And poverty, and basically white rural poverty, was either unimportant or didn't exist as far as the Democrats were concerned the last couple of decades.
That's the other thing. The Democrats for the last 15, 20 years have adopted progressive, this progressivist agenda, this social justice bullshit,
Hmm.
where basically minorities can do no wrong and whites can do no right.
Well, I
And
guess. Sorry.
go on.
No, what I just wanted to say was that because of that viewpoint, we have gotten to a position where any time you had whites from these economically depressed rural communities who would say, well, wait a minute, Democrats, what about us and our concerns? They would get spoken down to as racist, when in reality they were just concerned with, issues that were vital to them, and just as anyone else would. And I think basically what's happened is the Democratic Party, which at least it purports itself to be the party of the working class and the party of the downtrodden, after basically being ignored and abandoned by the Democrats for so long, white working class people turned elsewhere. I mean, at the end of the day, you can't ignore a segment of your voting base for so long and expect them to still turn out for you.
No, you can't. And you can't, moreover and more importantly, because of this retarded ass, anti-white agenda that they've basically adopted, where, you can't, anything that you say to them against their agenda, this social justice agenda that they've been rocking the last several years, they immediately begin bombarding you with isms and ists and all this other just reprehensible, despicable, vile garbage.
Mm-hmm.
This whole idea that you can't be racist against white people, this whole myth of fucking white privilege. Motherfucker, let me tell you something. I've had many times in my life when I couldn't rub two fucking pennies together. So don't even fucking sit there and tell me about supposed white fucking privilege, you arrogant piece of shit. And that's what a lot of this is about. It's a railing against this politically correct garbage. This seething, vile cesspool of just filth and divisiveness. This insistence on identity politics the left has stuck to. They have gone so far to the left that they are now coming back around to the right, and they're sounding very fascist, more so than I ever could on my worst day. I mean, you look at these fucking idiots with these fucking riots talking about killing white people. You got people getting fucking beaten up in the fucking street because they voted for Trump? Seriously? That's what a lot of this was railing against, because your average American, and it's not just white people, Trump did consistently better than Mitt Romney or John McCain or George W. Well, not better than George W. Bush, because he was good with the Hispanics. But Trump has performed more solidly with minorities than any Republican in the last 10 years. And that was not what anyone was expecting. Because they've tried so hard to push this fucking racist narrative against Trump. Trump is not anti-immigration. He's anti-illegal immigration. Because we do have laws on the books about that. And they should be fucking enforced like, every other country on the planet. It's not racist. The laws are already there. Fucking enforce them. And as far as anything, really racist, I haven't heard Trump say anything that I would consider to be fucking racist. Unless, I guess maybe by liberal standards you could count the bad hombres comment. But as I've said before about that, that's just a colloquialism. I mean, it's not really used anymore. But I heard it quite a bit when I was growing up, and it just means like a fucking badass, someone you don't want to mess with. Bad news kind of thing.
All right. But all right. I want to. There are a couple of different things I want to tackle with you, and I really want to apologize right now. I don't mean to sound like I'm ganging up on you, but Greg, he voted for Hillary. Not sure who Zach voted for, and he really doesn't like to talk politics anyway. But you are the only person in this sort of podcast sphere who I know for certain voted for Trump and is willing to talk about it. So there's just a lot of stuff concerning Trump that I want to ask you about. And again, I don't want to make it seem like I'm being overly critical of you. I just need you are just the person to kind of bang.
I am so used to getting beaten up over it. Go ahead.
You're just the person to bang some of these questions off of.
No, go ahead. I've had several people already try to make me feel bad about it, so hit me with your best fucking shot.
And, at the end of the day, your guy won, so, you do have the final laugh on that.
Maybe. We'll see. Go on.
All right. First question. You mentioned the alt-right about whether or not it is, whether or not it's racist. I guess, first of all, I'd ask how familiar, because I don't want to sort of paint all Trump voters with one brush, so I want to ask you, as a Trump voter, how familiar are you with the alt-right as sort of a thing?
Probably more than some, but not as much as others. I'll give you my take on it.
Okay.
In two different ways. That, honestly, yeah, there are a lot of people there associated with the alt-right who claim to be alt-right who do say some pretty raunchy shit. Some pretty racist fucking raunchy shit.
Okay.
That being said, I think in a lot of cases, it basically got its start with the internet. And when it is...
That's always a bad sign.
Well, yeah, kind of. I mean, like, okay, in this...
Nothing that's birthed on the internet can be good. And that's not a political thing. That's just...
Here's the deal, though. Like, with so many, like, internet movements, it lacks it's very similar to Gamergate. In fact, in a lot of ways, it is Gamergate in a lot of respects, because it doesn't have a codified ideology to it. And what I think it means could be completely different from what some others would say they think it means. And still others say that it's actually not even like a different form of conservatism. It's conventional conservatism, just expressed in a different way. By using memes and humor instead of the more conventional aspects of political discourse. I personally tend to kind of agree with the latter agreement, and I think I kind of explained the more racial aspects of a lot of what I see said as being people who just enjoy seeing fuckers triggered.
Yeah, that is something. I mean, okay, there are people...
Because you've got people who are just literally asking for it.
You have... So, I mean, okay, so this is where I think it becomes very hard to even talk about the alt-right and to even try to understand it, because I have seen, there are people, and an example of this would be the YouTube personality, internet aristocrat. He's now going under the name Mr. Medicare. It is the same guy, and he's openly the same guy. But he did a thing, basically, where he made a video where he didn't come out and say anti-Semitic stuff, but the undertone of the video was very anti-Semitic. And then, to finish off the video, he played the song from Borat, Throw the Jew Down the Well. Now, here's the thing about that. Well, here's the thing about that. Throw the Jew Down the Well was written by Sacha Baron Cohen, who is a Jew.
Right.
Mr. Medicare, internet aristocrat, from what I can tell, is a smart enough person to know that. He knows that. So I don't think it was a case of anti-Semitism. He was trying to, as you said, trigger people.
Yeah.
And just to let me finish, I think that's what's so frustrating about the alt-right is a lot of it, I think, can broadly be divided into two groups of people. One is legitimate racists, and two are people who are just sort of tired of overly politically correct language and culture, and enjoy black humor, and because of that are willing to engage in, kind of racist imagery or messages, not because they believe it, but because they think it's funny that people get upset as a result of it. And that's why it's so hard to try to understand this alt-right kind of thing, because the first question is, which group represents the alt-right? Is it the racists or is it the trolls? Which is the quote-unquote real alt-right? Is it the legitimate bigots or just the people who, like wrestling jimmies? And then on top of that is, okay, even if you make a decision one way or another, how do you separate the two? Because it's the fucking internet, and these people are, and if people enjoy triggering people just to get a rise out of people, then you're not going to get a straight answer out of them if you ask them. So it's insanely frustrating because you just don't know. So I would say there's that. But, okay. I also want to kind of pivot, I guess, kind of towards Breitbart for a moment, because their editor, Steve Bannon, is now going to be one of Trump's closest advisors as President of the United States. He's also allegedly an anti-Semite. Of course, I want to say, in the interest of being fair and balanced, that he's being accused of anti-Semitism by his ex-wife. And so, of course...
And let's also not forget that Trump's own daughter is Jewish.
Well, his daughter converted to Judaism when she married her husband, who is an Orthodox Jew, and their kids are being raised Jewish, so yeah, there's that.
Here's the thing, though. Like, since being elected, in the now week that it's been since the election, Trump has literally been able to do no right as far as like media coverage goes on television. Okay, he chooses Rice Prius for White House Chief of Staff, and you've got people on TV, even on Fox, saying, "Oh, well, he promised change, and yet he's." Appointing the former head of the Republican Party, and then he appoints Bannon, and oh my God, white supremacist. And
well, but if Bannon does have this history, don't people have the right to be concerned that someone with the history of these sort of viewpoints is going to have the ear of the leader of the most powerful country in the world?
And that's a pretty big if, with no actual evidence of it that I know of. The thing about Bannon, remarks by his ex-wife, as soon as maybe I'm biased here, but I see the words ex-wife, and I immediately just kind of discount all of it, because I know what mine would say about me.
Would you say that term triggers you, sir?
Don't make me hurt you.
I'm sorry.
I can find Tampa very easily now. It's not some alien place that I've never been to like Toronto. I can find you.
Yeah, plus I was protected by border security before.
Yeah, exactly. So...
okay, but no, I decided that... okay, so...
I don't think Bannon is a white supremacist or anti-Semite or whatever the fuck he's being accused of. I've heard the allegations vary so wildly from mouth to mouth that's uttering them. I don't think he is. It doesn't really seem to kind of fit. Trump's own daughter is Jewish. His son-in-law is Jewish. His grandchildren are Jewish. Then again, on the flip side, I can see Trump just being the type to be like, look, I don't care what you think on your own time. That's none of my fucking business. Just do your goddamn job. Mm-hmm. I could also see him doing that. I don't know. Bannon has been with Trump since the start. Bannon has been, evidently, he was like a co-founder of Breitbart, which I think you might be a little more familiar with than me even, Does Breitbart have a tendency to run anti-Semitic material?
The term that I've heard in relation to Breitbart's anything that you could accuse Breitbart of, as far as anti-Semitism goes, is dog whistle anti-Semitism.
I don't even know what that is.
Basically, that they won't come out and say, fuck Jews, but they will write articles that heavily imply that. Coming out and saying it.
Got you.
Basically, to be perfectly honest, I don't have much of a history with Breitbart. It's not I'm very old school where I get my news from. I get my news from CBC, BBC, and CNN. That is where, and then on top of all that, places where my friends find it. Like if a friend of mine, has wants to link me to Vox or the Huffington Post, then they send me a link to an article and I'll read it there. But then that. But I have actually a very limited scope, I guess. I'm kind of reading a story because I wanted to Google Breitbart anti-Semitism when you asked me, specifically because I really don't know. I'm just going to read the first couple of paragraphs here. This is from The Intercept by Robert McKay. Quote, since Steve Bannon is going to be one of the president's most senior aides, he and the website he runs, Breitbart News, deserves unusual amount of scrutiny. But Breitbart, the site Bannon calls the platform for the alt-right, many claim is read ardently by white supremacists and anti-Semites. It has launched a campaign to shut down critics who say its longtime director himself is an anti-Jewish racist. The Breitbart counteroffensive has come with a string of articles published this week in which Jewish writers and editors argue that Bannon cannot possibly be anti-Semite, as his ex-wife claimed in court, since the site he ran until August has a long history of strongly pro-Israel stance, and its nationalist government under Benjamin Netanyahu. The testimony came from pro-Israel writers who freely hurl accusations of anti-Semitism at rights activists and journalists for reporting abuses by the Israeli government. So, the first to write was David Horowitz, a key figure in funding anti-Palestinian think tanks in the United States and Israel. Horowitz attempts to argue that critics of Bannon, quote, have lost all connection to reality and are now hyping their most ludicrous paranoid fantasies. So there's that.
So basically, to really boil all this down, they don't know, but they have through this whole thing with the ex-wife or whatever, and by just whatever flimsy means they can, they find the way to hurl the accusations. Again, anyone who disagrees with a lot of these people gets bombarded with is and isms. And it makes it almost impossible to tell who is and who...
Sorry, I just mean to interrupt, because and even though I'm interrupting you, I think you're going to like this. Bannon, as you said, was one of the key founders of Breitbart. He was one of two, the other being Andrew Breitbart, who died in 2012, but Andrew Breitbart was Jewish. So,
yeah, again, people, more ifs and isms, and this has become the far left. Now, I'm not talking about your blue dog Democrats, your workaday stiffs who just voted out of tradition. I'm talking about, the true progressives, the SJWs in the party.
Mm.
Basically, I'm not talking about Greg here. They have shown themselves just to be horrible. I mean, honestly, the Republicans and Trump don't need to do anything. These fucking asshats are doing it all for them. Because before the election, the media was like, oh, well, there's major concerns for riots if Trump loses or when Trump loses. A lot of them would just come out and say when. And yeah, look at what fucking happened. Love trumps hate being held up on a sign while cars burn in fucking Portland. Someone holding up a sign saying rape Melania. Champions of feminism. They've just lost their fucking minds.
I will say that, yeah, that has been a immensely, I don't know how to say it, disappointing, anger-inducing, what have you, a view that, I mean, yeah, you had a lot of people worried about a Trump, loss causing riots, and then it turns out that the people who were worrying about that possibility are now the ones rioting. And another thing I mentioned previously, I'm going to mention it again. If you look at a map of the Electoral College and only look at voters who are under the age of 35, Hillary wins this in a landslide. But she didn't. And so the take from that is that not enough of those people voted to get Hillary the win, and a lot of these rioters are in the under 35 demographic.
And half of them didn't vote.
No, exactly, which is what I'm saying. It's the same thing that happened back in the summer of 2015 when the UK had their last general election, and the Tories won a surprise victory, a surprise majority, and then you had all of these people protesting it the next day, and I kept going, oh, gee, if only there was an election where you could have had your voice heard on the matter, right? And it's sort of that thing here where, look, if a Donald Trump presidency upset you enough to the point where you're willing to riot over it, then it should have upset you enough to the point where you could have gone to vote to ensure that it didn't happen. But you didn't, and look, I'm going to say the same argument to the people rioting that, people were tut-tutting Trump supporters with before the election, and that is one of the fundamental hallmarks of the United States as a country. One of the things that has made the United States exemplary as a democracy through the centuries has been the peaceful transition of power. And as much as people were calling on Trump to respect that in the event that he lost, you need to do that now that he's won. You've got to accept that Donald Trump is the lawfully elected president-elect of the United States, and in January he will be sworn in as, I think it's the 45th president?
Yes.
45th president of the United States. And you might not like it, but again, if you didn't like it enough to riot, then you should have not liked it enough to bother voting. And if you didn't, well, then that's on you.
Well, and again, the irony, the sheer amount of irony with this is just so fucking beautiful. Because it shows these pieces of shit for what they really are. I mean, in every way. All this talk about, making sure everyone's voice is heard, tolerance, love, democracy, all of this bullshit that they have been on about. Look at them. I mean, where's the... They are only tolerant if you agree with them. And frankly, they practice what I think is one of the worst forms of discrimination or racism that there is. They try to group everyone into their own little block. And basically anyone who steps outside of that, they turn on.
I won't disagree. I agree with you there. I think when we talked about Gamergate, I said something similar that as someone who is both gay and Jewish, a lot of these people tend to think that if you're gay or Jewish or both, then you have to think a certain way, act a certain way, have certain beliefs, and if you don't have those beliefs, then you're somehow a bad person. Like, for the implication being that, who you're sexually attracted to somehow has a bearing on your thoughts on national security or your thoughts on, the tax code. and it really doesn't. And likewise, religion has little to do with those factors either. So,
right.
I agree with you there that
a person is so much more than who they sleep with, or their skin color, or their, any of this stuff. But that's what these people, they sow the seeds of divisiveness by saying, hey, you're gay, look, you're being oppressed. Hey, you're black, look, you're being oppressed. Okay? And it's gotten ridiculous. And they do it for the sake of it's a power hold. Then they can they create the problem by inventing these patterns of racism that they say are there. I'm not saying racism never happens anymore. I'm not saying this at all. But I'm saying in a lot of cases that they get on about, it's really not. And they sow so many seeds of divisiveness that they can then in turn say, we'll protect you, we'll fight for you. And, they will, or they say they will, as long as you give them your vote. But if you don't, my God, they'll turn on you like a pack of fucking rabid vipers. If such a thing. Can snakes get rabies? I don't know. But if snakes
I think
get
you were
rabies,
going for a rabid wolf thing, and somehow that got turned around.
No. Because snakes are far more treacherous than wolves. Wolves at least will show loyalty to their own in a pack. It's horrible. And in that regard, it's horrible. I think it's wonderful and beautiful that they are so fully and utterly showing their colors to the world.
What do you think of the idea? And I'm going off of one of my fellow CCSLC mods, Dennis, who is a listener to our programs. He had this to say, and I wanted to pass it by you to see what you thought. Basically, this is the first election for the generation that grew up in the participation trophy era.
Yeah,
and this is really the first kick. And this is really the first kick in the ass they have. That sometimes there's a winner and a loser, and if you no-show, it has consequences.
Okay, here's the other problem, and this is a big one. And I told you some of this was going on the other night. Mm-hmm. Michigan University law students are being told that they can come into this room and sit and color and play with Play-Doh to help get over election anxiety. And all these little fucking whining, sniveling little pieces of shit wanting to go to their fucking safe spaces.
Well, this is absurd. I had election anxiety. You know how I dealt with it? I drank.
Yeah, like a real person.
Like a real person. I drank and indulged in cough syrup, like, a responsible adult.
Look, sometimes life sucks. Get a fucking helmet. How do you think I felt for the last fucking 8 years? Goddamn Obama. And the funny thing is, I learned a lot from the Obama administration. I wasn't one of the ones saying to build an ark, when he won.
Oh, we had two of those.
No, yeah.
In our WoW T and Kel.
Yeah. I wasn't one of the ones saying to build an ark or anything like that. But no, I definitely did not like the idea of what I thought just basically presumed to be a radical socialist being elected. Mm-hmm. And, I was just a lot more reserved than most about it. But I didn't like the idea one damn bit. But I've seen, among the right wing into things, the people saying, oh, well, Obama's going to take your guns. Obama's going to take your Bibles. Uh-huh. And all this rampant fear-mongering, just like the left has done with Trump. Mm-hmm. Just fucking like it, just a different shit. Uh-huh. And, hey, guys, the thought police never came and took my Bible.
Didn't take your guns.
Didn't take our guns.
So I guess what you're saying is after 8 years of Obama, you have learned to be not so hyperbolic in worrying about the fact that the other guy won.
Yeah. Had Hillary won, would I have been happy? No. But, life would have gone on. The sun would have risen in the east, set in the west. The one thing I would have been worried about Hillary is nuclear war. But again, at that point, it's like, nothing I can do about it. Fuck it. I mean, seriously. And just hope her advisors kind of keep her hawkish attitude in check. So, I mean, sometimes your candidate loses. It fucking happens, all right? You deal with it. I mean, this whole shit of these people just crying on fucking YouTube and Instagram and Snapchat. Oh, I'm shaking. I'm so scared. Shut the fuck up. What have you got to be scared of? These people have listened to this fucking narrative that's been pushed about why you should be afraid of Trump. And really, there's not any credence to any of it. I mean, is he the nicest guy to ever walk the planet? Fuck no. Has he said some bad shit about women? Yeah, he has. But you know what? None of you have to date him. None of you have to have him come and babysit your daughter. He's running the country, not a preschool. Mm. I mean, how does I think we've long passed the point where a president is, needs to pass the moral criteria to be a fucking role model. I think we passed that point with JFK. And then we passed it again with Clinton. And with God only knows who all else before that. I mean, presidents are people too. They are human. They have flaws.
Now you mentioned, okay, your point is taken. Your point is taken, and I tend to be of the opinion that no candidate's personal flaws should matter if it doesn't interfere with their running of the country. I thought that people freaking out over the fact that Bill Clinton got a blowjob in the Oval Office somehow made him unfit to be president was asinine.
Yeah.
It didn't interfere with his ability to do his job.
And I freely admit, at the time, I was asinine.
All right. But
I do, in retrospect, see the error of that.
Well, I was too young to have an opinion at the time, but since,
You like Power Rangers.
Yeah, exactly. But since growing up, I've looked back and thought, that was a stupid thing people said. And likewise, I will freely admit that Donald Trump, how he speaks about women, and I say this as someone, it does bother me how he talks about women, but I will say that will be so far on my list of things to care about if he proves to be effective at his job in running the United States of America.
He's not going to come into your home and have grab fest.
But my point is, so I'm not really concerned about what he says about women or how he treats women. If he is an effective president, then okay, I won't care. But you asked, what are people worried about? And I can't speak for anyone else, because I am not them. And further, I will say that all this safe space, election anxiety bullcrap is just that. It's bullcrap. I think it's absolutely disgraceful how certain elements of the left wing have sort of fallen into the safe space trap, especially in academia. I've spent, at least right now, at where this point in my life, I've spent a good 10 years as a student pursuing various degrees. I'm now in a position where I'm currently in my fourth year, as a teacher in an academic setting. I admit that it is absolutely disgraceful to see the way that some of the... I mean, come on, you're a fucking law student at an accredited university. Grow the fuck up. Because when I was in university, and it wasn't that long ago, mind you.
Yeah, no, it wasn't.
It wasn't that long ago when I was in university. If the other side lost an election, I remember, having debates with people about politics the day after an election in Canada. Because we talked about it, and we argued, and sometimes we argued with people who were on the same side because we voted for the same party, but we had different ideas of what we wanted to see happen, and that was good for us, because one of two things is going to happen if you engage with people with a different viewpoint. One, you're either going to learn how to better and more rationally defend your own position, which is a good thing, or two, it's going to open you up to different viewpoints, and you might change your mind, and that's a good thing, because changing your mind isn't a bad thing. You yourself, Jack, said that, at the time, you were asinine about the idea that by believing that Bill Clinton was somehow unfit to be president because he got a blowjob in the Oval Office, and you admit yourself have admitted, both on this show and on other shows, that your sense of conservatism has undergone somewhat of a transformation over the years.
Yeah.
Changing your mind is never a bad thing. And so, I'm right there with you on this whole safe space bullshit. But, when you ask about what, people have to be worried about, and I admit this was my biggest concern and why, I had anxieties about the election, and I confided in that with you, is because Donald Trump has made some remarks that, as far as gay marriage went, as far as LGBT rights went, he presented himself as not the biggest fan. And so much as the Log Cabin Republicans, a group of gay Republicans, went from calling him the most pro-gay Republican candidate ever to run for the presidency, they went from that to completely pulling their endorsement when he made his vice presidential selection. So...
Which, I don't blame... Pence is a piece of shit. You will not hear one bit of argument out of me on that.
But when you have Donald Trump saying that, he's going to try to do what he can to reverse the Supreme Court ruling that legalized gay marriage, I don't think it's wrong to write off the concerns of people who that would affect.
You say you don't think it's wrong?
I'm saying people have a right to be concerned.
Okay,
that's what I'm saying.
I get where you're coming from on that, and I'll tell you on air what I've told you in private.
Mm-hmm.
Trump's position on that matter since he became the presumptive nominee onward, he has remained steadfast and consistent, even backing it up since being elected. He got up there, at the convention, as the actual Republican nominee, and said he would fight for LGBT rights.
Mm-hmm.
And he has said, recently in the interview on 60 Minutes, he says he views marriage equality as a settled issue.
Mm-hmm. And I will admit that was when I saw that, it relieved a lot of my anxieties when I heard him say that. But at the same time, I don't think that invalidates my earlier concerns.
No, not at all. Not at all. But I think that your concerns you didn't express by going out and rioting. You didn't express them by screaming at anybody.
That seems like a whole thing.
That
seems like a schlep.
That's a lot of effort.
I don't. But speaking of which, apparently there are some people on the religious right who are having a bit of a hissy fit after Donald Trump came out and said that he was fine with gay marriage. Just to sort of read this article from LGBTQ Nation by Graham Gremore. Donald Trump sat down in 60 Minutes last week for his first televised interview since winning the election. He discussed a wide range of topics, including gay marriage. When asked whether he would roll back marriage equality laws, Trump nonchalantly said it's no longer an issue he cares to pursue. Quote, "It's irrelevant because it's already settled," he said. "It's the law. It was settled in the Supreme Court. It's done. These cases have gone to the Supreme Court, and they've been settled, and I'm fine with that." Christian extremists not taking it well, and then a load of tweets of people being upset that Donald Trump is fine with the gay people.
Well, when you're voting for a New York Republican, what do you expect? And again, I said at the beginning, and I'll say it now. Donald Trump is the most openly pro-gay presidential candidate America's ever had, and I'm happy that the Republicans can claim this one and not the Democrats for once. While they're in the streets raging about their imagined problems, here's the Republican Party electing a president who openly has no issues with marriage equality and gay rights.
But again, then, that sort of has people questioning the fact, and again, why he lost the log cabin Republican endorsement. Not that that necessarily matters in the long term, but, they went from saying he's great to being maybe not because, well, Mike fucking Pence. And I know you're not you said you're not going to defend Mike Pence, and I'm not asking you to defend Mike Pence, but again, it's sort of the question of he tempered a lot of enthusiasm on that front from LGBT people when he kind of nominates someone like Mike Pence to be his vice president, as pathetically impotent as the office might be.
Yeah. And I can see how and why the log cabin Republicans would have pulled their endorsement. I totally get it. They don't feel like they can in good conscience support a ticket with Pence on it. And I don't blame them one bit for it. I view Pence as serving much the same role in Trump's administration as I do Biden with Obama's.
Mm-hmm.
Pence is assassination insurance. And I like to think that some of these crazy anarchists, these crazy left-wingers, before they try to pull a trigger, they're like, wait, I don't like Trump, but if I shoot him, then we get Captain God Squad over there. Oh, pack him up, Harv. Let's go home.
Look, if Barack Obama made it through 8 years without getting assassinated, I think Donald Trump will manage at least 4.
Well, they're calling for, mass riots at the fucking inauguration.
I honestly don't think there's going to be mass riots in the inauguration.
We'll see. We will see. I hope it goes. They said their goal was either to stop, quote unquote, stop the inauguration or to force it to be held indoors.
Well, I don't know what good that's going to do.
I don't know. They're talking about blah, blah, blah. Trump's going to bring a police state, blah, 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 blah. And that's the other thing.
Okay.
Every Republican candidate, in my memory, has been referred to as a Nazi. That's another reason why Trump won, frankly, because they say this every time, and you know what? No one's listening anymore. No one's listening. No one cares. Because it's just something they say now. When everyone's Hitler, then no one's Hitler.
Were people actually calling Mitt Romney Hitler?
Oh yeah, I seen a picture on the that was the funniest of them all. It said Adolf Romney. It was a picture of they had one of George Bush, they had one of John McCain, they had one of Mitt Romney. I'm looking at these, I'm like, okay, Bush and McCain, all right, fine, whatever, but Mitt fucking Romney, really? The man was as offensive as toast.
Yeah, I definitely remember the Bush-Hitler comparisons because, well, that was like the whole Iraq War thing. That existed. I couldn't remember off the top of my head if anyone called McCain or Romney Hitler, although I suppose, yeah, they probably did.
And I seen this thing, it was Bill Maher who was on, and he was saying this like right before the election. Mm-hmm. And I'll give him credit on some of what he said lately. Mm-hmm. He does understand why the left has just really fucked itself. He mm-hmm. fully understands it. And he was on his show, and he's like, hey, look, guys, I know. And I'm part of the problem. I have been part of the problem. And for the last 20 years, I've come up here and I've called Bush a Nazi, and I've called Romney a Nazi. and I've called, all these Republicans, fascists and all this other stuff. And he says, you know what? They were all right guys. I didn't agree with their policies, but they themselves were all right guys, and I respect them. And he's like, and I know that we have cried wolf way too many years for you to take us seriously, but I'm telling you, don't vote for Trump. And I'm just like, well, I mean, good on you for realizing your mistake, but I don't think anyone's listening to you guys anymore. I mean, and I'll admit Trump has said some admittedly fascist-sounding-esque things. And I don't think that really bothers anyone as much as you would think it does anymore at this point. I mean, that's how broken I think our system has become, that we are almost literally willing to try and do anything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's why you had on both the right and the left this election cycle, you had, populist candidates surging up and with their own variation of the platform, but they were still both populist candidates. And I still maintain Bernie probably could have beaten Trump if Hillary had not just rigged the whole goddamn primary thing.
See, I'm not entirely sure that Bernie could have won, because going back to a discussion earlier talking about the voters that sort of ushered Trump into office, rural, small town, white Americans. I don't want to stereotype or push anyone into labels, but at the same time, I find it hard that group would have been okay in large enough numbers to vote for a socialist Jew from Yankee Land.
I mean, I don't know. It could have gone either way, but I think it would have been like an alternative. Like there could have been two actual, honest-to-God change candidates on the roster instead of people only having one alternative for change. I mean, you had, I mean, Obama was a change candidate last time, and people voted for him and just got mediocrity. And they're like, okay, well, this doesn't work. And this time you had Hillary, who, basically touted herself as an evolution, not a revolution. I was going to be the cool black guy. And that was the other part of her problem. She took that shit for granted. Like, she was so cocky. She just, from beginning to end, she was cocky. She thought this shit was her. And in a lot of ways, it was hers to lose. And she did, because she got arrogant.
I wouldn't say arrogance cost her. I would say, again, the Democratic Party has basically neglected the economically disadvantaged rural white America, and that was the group that voted in Trump, and nobody saw it for the reasons you and I discussed earlier, being that, to a lot of people in the media, and polling is an outgrowth of media, a lot of these people, simply weren't on their radars for, a variety of reasons. And that, I would say... And so that's why I'm not even sure it was Hillary's to lose, because I'm looking at a lot of polls, and I'm not even sure how accurate any of the polling was. I mean, if we had... what I'm saying is it's a very real possibility that if we had accurate polling from the get-go, that maybe Trump's up 15 points for the entire election. And I'm saying we just don't know, because the polling was so fundamentally broken.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Trump campaign insists that they had numbers similar to that, to what actually ended up being the vote the entire time.
I don't buy that.
I don't know.
I don't buy that because, like you said, there's like a Trump guy who, like the day of the election, said, it's going to take a miracle for us to win. Yeah. And that's not something you say if you've got the super secret real numbers that say everything's all fine.
I don't know. I mean, that was the line that Conway was spinning when she was on making the morning show circuit the next day.
Yeah, but she's also She also bullshits for a living, so
That woman deserves a medal. I'm sorry, she does.
For deflecting all of Donald Trump's regrettable comments.
I mean, God, does she play WoW? Because she makes a great tank. Just saying.
Yeah, the Mr. Trump only used the deaf voice so the deaf people could hear him.
He just said that gay people eating pasta was disgusting because he wants them to eat healthier. Though, I mean, the election itself aside, I want to talk for a moment about some of the shit that has happened since. I mean, we touched on that a little bit with cabinet appointments, but, I mean, my God, it's been kind of funny because...
And how Chris Christie's been relegated off to no man's land because apparently... So remember we were talking about Donald Trump's son-in-law, who is apparently another one of his closest advisors? Well, apparently Donald Trump's son-in-law, his dad, was brought to court on criminal charges in New Jersey, and guess who the prosecutor at the time was?
I don't know.
Chris Christie.
Oh, okay.
And so basically now that, Trump's been elected... His son-in-law being one of his closest advisors, well, now Chris Christie is losing out. He was the head of the transition team before he lost that. Apparently, he was going to be the attorney general, and now that's on the outside. So, Chris Christie, not in a good spot.
Well, yeah, and that was I think that was part of it, and the other rumor was that he was filling the transition team with people who would be loyal to him. But more to the point, since Trump got elected, the Mexican president has come up and said, well, okay, maybe we'll help pay for part of the wall.
Has he?
Yes!
Jesus.
Canada and Mexico have both approached and said, hey, yeah, we're totally willing to renegotiate NAFTA with you. Love you, bro.
Well, Justin Trudeau kind of put his foot in the mouth of Trump during the primaries, and so now he's got to deal with that, and Justin, maybe don't talk negatively about people who you have a real chance of working with, is all I can say.
It was funny, like, my Twitter feed the next couple days after the election was like, so much winning! He's not even in office yet, and we're winning everything! What else? Of course, I mean, then there's the meeting between Trump and Farage.
Yeah, but Farage isn't a...
he's not a government official or anything, but I do find it to be interesting and
well, in a lot of ways, Trump's electoral victory and Trump's electoral victory here and the Brexit vote kind of both, they mirror each other in a lot of ways. In both cases, polling was incredibly inaccurate, and in both cases, it was the disenfranchised. I don't want to say disenfranchised because they do have the vote, but the I guess ignored white working class basically propelled both the Leave vote and the Trump campaign to victory. And in both cases, this is a group of voters who national media failed to recognize as a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it's been really interesting. Trump has very much signaled that he expects his foreign policy is probably going to be very Anglo-centric.
Well, he's already said that Britain is going back to the front of the line, I guess, in terms of trade deals.
Oh, completely unrelated to Trump at all, but fucking hilarious. The North Koreans have asked Chinese ambassadors to please stop fat-shaming Kim Jong-un.
Really?
Yes. I shit you not.
Isn't this, Kim Jong-un is the only world leader I know of that actually got sick from eating too much cheese, so,
Oh my god, yeah, I seen them like, oh, that's... It was like the way it was phrased, too. It wasn't like, North Korea makes demands for this. It was, North Korea asks China to please stop fat-shaming Kim Jong-un.
Oh, Kim Jong-un. So, anything else in particular about the Trump, potential Trump presidency, the vote? I think I'm racking my brain. I think I covered most of the points I wanted to tackle with you tonight.
I will say this. I mean, in spite of, how I've come out throughout the election and what I've said about how I feel about the results. I mean, honestly, because, and you and I discussed this, I did put a lot of thought into this actual vote for once. And I will say that, in spite of how I've sounded throughout the election, I have not drank the Kool-Aid. But, god damn it, it's been 12 years since I've actually been pretty much happy with a presidential candidate. So I'm allowing myself to feel good about this one.
Okay.
And I'm going to let myself be cautiously optimistic.
That seems to be... I saw a story on CNN where they were going over some... They polled a bunch of voters, and I don't think cautiously optimistic was the word they said, but it's sort of like a hesitant optimism seems to be the prevailing mood of people who voted for Trump.
Yeah, I mean, again, there is that fear of the unknown. Because, I mean, we know what he said he's going to do, but like someone said the other day, the media always took Trump literally, but never seriously. Mm-hmm. And his voters took him seriously, just usually not literally. Mm-hmm. And that could really, in a lot of cases, not be more true. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, he spouted a lot of ideas. Very little actual policy, but a lot of ideas. And they were ideas, all right, we're picking up what you're putting down. We get what you want to do, kind of ish. Yeah, we're down. And what the ultimate manifestation of this platform will be, we don't know. Which is both the really awesome thing and also kind of the spooky thing.
But you don't believe that this platform and this Trump administration will be racist, xenophobic, homophobic, or anything like that?
I believe that I definitely don't believe it's going to be homophobic. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's going to be racist either in a lot of ways. Like, okay, again, these things really depend on who you ask. The left, absolutely, it'll probably be all of those things and already is. And if you don't like it, then you're just mansplaining. Mm-hmm. By my standards, no, I don't think it's going to be. Because, I don't see anything wrong with deporting illegals. I don't see anything wrong with telling Syria to cram its refugees up its ass. I don't see anything wrong with us temporarily halting immigration from, Muslim countries in the Middle East in the name of national security. It's not like we're just arbitrarily saying, hey, we don't like Muslims. No, there is, a valid security threat there. Just look at what's been going on in Europe. ISIS is training operatives to blend in with the refugee population. It is a valid concern and a realistic danger. And no, I'm sorry. Say Islamophobia all you want. Your bullets bounce off me now, niggas. I don't give a shit. I don't care. Call me that all you fucking want. No, I don't think we should take them in for a while. Or at the very least, as Trump also mentioned as a possible alternative, quote-unquote, heavy vetting. So, yeah, with those caveats aside, no, I don't think his administration is going to be what the regressive left would have you believe. I really don't.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that's fair enough. Anything else in particular that you want to say, Jack? Because I think I've kind of run through my talking points on the issue, and if floor is yours. If there's anything else that you want to discuss that hasn't been brought up yet.
No, I mean, I think I've made my peace. I think I've managed to get through this without saying anything too terribly ungodly offensive, so I'll end on that high note.
All right. Well, just something just popped up in my mind now.
Of course.
Just now that I wanted to run by you.
Go on.
What do you feel going forward? What do you feel the Democratic Party needs to do going forward to sort of recover? Because
dissolve.
Assume this is not an option.
Kirikiri? Seppuku?
No.
Kool-Aid?
No.
Become Republicans?
No.
Well, here's the thing. I know what they should do. What they should do is realize where they fucked up and renounce, the SJWs and the regressive left. But they're actually doubling down because they've they've nominated this new Ellison guy as the new DNC chairman.
I don't know anything about it.
I don't feel like going into that right now, honestly. It's a whole other thing, and I'm honestly getting rather tired of getting a little bit of a headache.
Gotcha. Well, I guess I'll just say the Democratic Party needs to synthesize the Clinton and the Bernie wings, and they need to push in the Bernie direction, to be perfectly honest. I will admit, and I'll admit this going forward, I thought that as sincere and as much as I liked Bernie Sanders in a lot of ways, I didn't think he was electable. I didn't think that his way forward was viable, and I was wrong. I'll admit it, I was wrong. I think that for the Democratic Party going forward, they need to abandon the idea that poverty only equals black and poverty only equals Latino, because they lost what should be the bedrock of the Democratic Party, which is, the white working class.
They need to accept that more than just poverty, but, they need to renounce this myth of white privilege. They need to believe in true, actual fucking equality. They need to believe in the concept that anyone can be racist against anybody, and it's never acceptable. Mm-hmm. If you actually mean it, and you're not just saying it for lulz.
I would say, well, you and I were talking about this, that apparently Bill was telling Hillary's campaign people that she needed to shore up support in Ohio and in Wisconsin and in Michigan, basically saying, hey, the Rust Belt's the backbone of the Democratic Party. We need to shore up support there, and they basically called him a stupid idiot.
Yeah.
And so, I think basically the Democratic Party needs to lean more in the Bernie Sanders direction, to be perfectly honest. And I think they need to go along with what you said, essentially, that they need to, that basically identity politics, the regressive left, and everything that goes along with that needs to be ditched. They need to go by the wayside, because it's not viable, and it doesn't speak to the majority of Americans. I think that was proved on election night.
I mean, it's the very thing that they have derided others for. I mean, they're the ones that are basically practicing exclusionist policies. They're the ones who are trying to divide people by race and religion and gender and sexual orientation. Mm-hmm. I mean, all of this, just look at it. It's all going back to them. I mean, with the exception being, the evangelical right on the Republican end, but even they're kind of shutting up a lot here lately. You didn't hear nearly as much from them this election as you normally do.
Well, I would argue because you didn't have a candidate who was, I guess, their guy, quote unquote. I mean, I get. In a lot of ways, Romney and McCain weren't, but they kind of veered into them to, quote, shore up the base. Whereas Trump didn't actively alienate them, although apparently he did by saying he's fine with gay marriage. But during the election, at least, he didn't actively alienate him. But I don't think anyone could have said with a straight face that Donald Trump is, the religious rights guy.
Yeah, no. They did their dance. It was ceremonial. Enough for them to save face and for Trump to get on with what he honestly views to be more important things, like jobs, securing the border, quote-unquote bombing the shit out of ISIS. These are his things, right? This other stuff that the evangelicals care about, he doesn't give a fuck. He doesn't give a fuck about that. That's not his deal. He's a fucking businessman. He's not a preacher. But he said just enough so that they can believe, so they can believe it without feeling too insulted, and he moved on with what he really gives a shit about.
Now, I guess, with that being said, that's kind of all I wanted to just kind of add right then and there to sort of what I think the Democratic Party needs to do, which is, well, quite frankly, well, no. But they need to, if they are going to be the party of the, if they're going to be the party of the downtrodden, then they need to be the party of the downtrodden and not, I guess, view poverty through a racial lens, because I think the belief that poverty is tied to race is one of the big myths that I think historically, in retrospect, will be seen as the reason why the Democratic Party fell apart during this time in history. Whether or not they are able to rebound, I think, is going to depend on whether or not they are able to kind of get over that. But I think that's what they need to get off. The Democrats need to understand why they lost the rural white vote, sort of the rural economically disadvantaged white vote. They need to understand why that happened, and they need to work to rectify that if they're going to have a future. And that's sort of all I wanted to say on that topic. But I think you and I have both kind of exhausted our talking points, Jack. And so, with that being said, this has been Bags 72, our all politics edition. We'll get back to you guys with BlizzCon with Bags 73. Also got some Power Rangers stuff to talk about then. But for now, this has been Mike, and this has been Jack, and we're signing off for the evening.
Later, guys.